It's time for you to collect materials so that you can work on your watercolor techniques. First thing you should have in front of you is a tray of watercolors. There's probably 2 brushes. You're only going to need 1. There is a small container of salt. There's a little white sponge. You're also going to need to go over to the sink and get yourself a cup of water and fill it about halfway full, not full, but halfway. You're going to need to go over the whiteboard by the sinks and get yourself a rag, and you're going to come to the front table and get yourself a paper towel. Once you have all of those things, then you can get to work. But press pause for right now and go collect what you need. Time to measure out your paper. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to put your paper in front of you horizontally. I know that you can't see the edges of my paper, but the edges of my paper line up with the screen. I want you to find somewhere near the middle. I'm using pen. You can use pencil. Somewhere near the middle horizontally, I want you to draw a line from the top to the bottom. And you can see my line's not perfectly straight. Now I'll slide that over so you can see there's the end of my paper. Now that I've divided this in half, we're going to divide this section. So between the line you created in the edge of the paper, we're going to divide this in half. From top to bottom. Again, we're going to try to make it straight, but we're not going to waste time with a ruler today. Now you're going to rotate your paper, and you're going to lay your pencil or pen approximately where the middle is. You're going to put your index finger here, and then you're going to put a little mark on one side of your index finger and a little mark on the other. That should be fairly close to thirds. Might not be perfect, so if you think one side, so this one actually looks a little too big, so I'm going to go over a little bit farther. We're going to divide this into 6 boxes, and these ones look kind of skinny, so I'm going to go up. And this bottom box, we're going to put a line through. So we're going to go diagonally through it. Pause this if you need to so you can finish constructing. Now that you're back again, we're going to label each of these spaces with some specific technique. First one is wash. You should be writing these down as I am writing them down. Graded wash. Wet in wet. Next row. I almost forgot. Wash with salt. 2, color wash. Wash with blotting. And we're going to also do a wash with lifting. All right, there you go. You should be able to see all of those. Pause the video if you need to so that you can finish writing these down. We're going to get ready to paint, but there's a few things we need to talk about. 1, your brush. We never want to leave the brush sitting in the water. You can probably see it on this red brush. You can see that the paint has chipped off, and the reason why is the handles that are underneath the paint are wood. And if water gets into the wood swells and it cracks all the paint off, and eventually this is going to ruin the brush. So do me a favor, don't just leave the brush when you're not using it in the water. Take it out, rinse it, and then maybe set it on the side by your rag or your towel, and that way you can just keep the brushes nicer longer. The brush has 3 components. There's the bristle that's tied together and then glued at the base. This metal part is called a ferrule, and that ferrule is basically like a paper clip that holds the bristles that have been glued together onto the wood handle. And then you have your handle, which we've talked about is wood, and the paint will chip off if we leave it in water for too long. So take one of your brushes, you don't need both right now, and then I want you to notice that your tray should be laid out similar to mine. The colors are not overly accurate right here on this video because they're so dark, and even in real life they're difficult to perceive the difference between. But you should have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, magenta, and turquoise. And they should be in that order or close to that order. There's a very specific reason why it's there. You're also going to notice that the tray is nice and clean, and that's the way we're going to return it at the end of class. So you're going to need your rag and your water nearby. Do not use your paper towel yet, all right? Do not use your paper towel yet. Just use your rag and your water so that we don't waste paper towels. The first one we're going to do is called a wash. And before we get started, no one has used the trays, so if you are my first class of the day, third period, chances are these are all dry or close to dry. They might be a little bit sticky. So you're going to put your brush in the water, you're going to wipe off the excess on the edge of your cup, and you're just going to put one tiny drop of water into each of those colors. And what that does is it wakes up the colors, so when we get ready to select a color today, we don't have to work so hard at getting that color to soften up. So go ahead and lighten everything up or get a little drop of water. Pause the video now if you need to get yours activated. If you are in fourth or fifth period, you don't even need to worry about that because the colors have already been used, and so you can skip this step completely. Now, I have a favor to ask. Do not use yellow unless I tell you to. Yellow is difficult to see some of these techniques, so there are a few that I will suggest yellow is a good time to use, but in general today, I want you to avoid using yellow, but I do want you to try as many of the colors as you can today in the 7 different things that we're going to do. So we're going to start with a wash, and a wash means that the color is even all the way across the paper. The idea is that when you're done and it dries, it will look almost airbrush smooth, but that requires us to use a good amount of water. So I am going to start with green, and I'm always going to dip my brush in the water. I have my rag in the other hand, and I'm just going to wipe the extra water off my brush, and then I'm going to stir it around in this color green. You don't need a lot of paint because watercolor should be transparent. So you're going to rub it around in here, and then you're actually going to go up and you're going to test it up there. And right now that's looking pretty watery. So I'm going to go back in and stir a little bit longer. Go back in one more time. There we go. Now I've got some good color. So this area is a palette that we use for mixing and testing to see how dark our color is. We don't want the color to be so dark that we can't see the white palette through it. So if you can't see the palette when you do this little kind of painting wiggle through it, then you have too much paint and you need to go back and get more water on your brush. So now I'm going to dip my water or my brush into the water. I'm going to grab just a tiny bit more paint, and I'm going to use the brush on its flat edge. All right, and we're going to go all the way across. Once I get that far, I'm running out of paint. I'm going to dip my brush into the water, and I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of that shape. And then I'm just going to stop. I know that part of this might look a little bit uneven, and that's okay. As it dries, it will actually even itself out. So just leave it alone. Don't keep trying to smooth out the paint strokes and all of that. Now you're going to rinse out your brush really well in your water cup, wipe off the excess water on your little towel, and we're going to pick another color. So pick a new color, and we are going to do the bottom right triangle. So I'm going to move my paint over here. You should not put your paint on top. Okay, don't do that because your paper will get all messed up. Just leave the paint set off to the side, left or right, depending on where you're sitting and maybe who you're sitting next to. Okay, we're going to do another wash in this bottom triangle. So pick a new color. Doesn't matter which one you pick, but again, you're going to rub your brush in it, and then you're going to test it up there, and that's a good amount of color. I can still see the palette through it, but it's nice and rich. Dip your brush into the water, and then paint. I'm going to get a little bit more, it should be watery. It should almost kind of flow around on the paper. It should not be something that you see your brush strokes with. It should be almost like you're pushing a bubble of color. And then once you've done that, you're going to stop. I want to show a quick example. If you end up with too much water and too much color, the paper is going to start to bend a little bit, and you're going to get what we call a bloom. All right, so that's a bloom when it gets too dark. It's like the water is pooling on that edge. So what you do is you take your brush, you rinse it, and you just tap it on your rag, and then you touch it in this bloom area, wipe it off on your rag, tap it in that bloom area, wipe it off on your rag, and just let it dry. Don't mess with it anymore. Don't touch it. It should dry relatively smooth. Go ahead and put this on pause and try this technique by yourself. We're now working with the salt. So go ahead and take the lid off of your salt. We're going to work in this bottom corner. Choose a darker color. If you choose a light color like orange, it might not turn out as well. So the blues, the violets, the turquoise are all good choices. So I'm going to go with the violet. And again, you're always going to test that color up here in your tray. That is actually too dark. I don't have enough water. Violet always goes really quickly. So we want the violet to look more like that. So now take your brush and do a wash just like we did earlier. Go back up to my tray, grab some more, maybe a tiny bit more purple. Use the flat side of your brush and push that water around. Now, when we're doing salt, it's super important to have the salt ready to go. And your paper should be shiny. It shouldn't be a big water droplet sitting there, but it should be shiny. Then I'm going to take my salt, I'm going to take a pinch of it, and I'm going to sprinkle it across the surface. So if your paper isn't shiny right now and you're not seeing a little bit of a gloss, so if you kind of tilt your head to the side, we have a small problem. The salt isn't going to work. But once we put this salt on here, we're going to let it dry, and what you can start to see is that the salt is pulling the pigment. It's kind of grabbing that purple color and it's pulling it towards itself. As it dries, it's going to leave behind little white dots in all of these little locations. So it looks a little bit like snow, maybe seeds, or what's another thing? Stars, right? So it gives us this kind of cool effect. If you don't see it happening and it starts to dry, you can try putting on just a tiny bit more. But again, if it's not shiny, this won't work. And if it's too shiny and too wet, what will happen is the salt will just melt and you will get no effect. Take your brush now when you're done and rinse it out. Go ahead and pause the video and get ready to do your own practice of water and salt. Now that we've done wash several times, now we're going to do what's called a graded wash. That means it's going to slowly change from dark to light. And I know I misspelled that, but it's faster, okay? In order to lighten a color in watercolor, we just add more water. So you're going to pick a color that's relatively dark because we want to be able to see this change. As always, dip your brush into the water, wipe the excess brush or water off, then rub it in the color, and then test it up here to make sure that you can still see the palette. As long as you can still see the palette, that looks pretty good. Still looks like blue, right? It's not too light. Now what we're going to do, we're going to dip our brush in water one more time, just the very tip of it. We're not trying to shake off the color. I'm going to go in and color a little bit more, double check, and now I'm going to make two. Oh, I want a little more blue. I want it to be pretty dark. So we're going to do this nice stripe of blue up here at the top. Now, without wasting time, I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to dip the tip into water and I'm going to wipe off the edge. I'm not trying to shake the color off. Now I'm going to go right up next to that last edge I painted and I'm going to use the flat side of my brush. And what you'll see is it starts to get lighter. I'm going to take my brush one more time, dip it in the water, don't shake it, wipe it on the edge of your cup, and pull it one more time. So it's important that you work quickly and don't go back up. Don't go backwards. Once you start it, you're just going to keep pulling it down by adding more water. Then when you're done, you can shake out your brush and call it good. Let it dry. So remember, start with about 2 rows of that darker color, dip the brush in water, wipe it on the edge of your cup, and overlap. Go over that darker color and then slowly start to pull it down. When you get about halfway, then go back, dip your brush again, wipe it on the edge of your cup, and finish it up. Then rinse your brush off really well so that you're ready to do the next color. Pause the video so that you can practice this on your own. All right, this is by far my favorite technique because it looks like tie-dye. But here's the trick. You have to use 3 colors that are side by side. You cannot use this red and turquoise together. It's going to look terrible. So you need to use 3 colors side by side. Red, orange, yellow, green. So now you can use yellow, green, blue, violet, blue, violet, magenta, violet, magenta, turquoise. All right, so 3 that are side by side, 1, 2, 3, and you're going to look at those colors and you're going to start with your lighter of the 3, whatever color that may be. So since we haven't used yellow yet, I'm going to show you with yellow, orange, and green. You're going to paint your paper with just the water that's in your cup. So you're literally taking your brush, you're getting it really wet. Don't even wipe the extra water off this time. Flatten those bristles out and paint in water on your paper. Make sure it covers the whole thing. Look at an angle to make sure that you've got a nice even layer of water. Now wipe your brush on the edge of the cup. Go get some color. Yellow, usually you got to rub a little bit longer to get some good color. Now watch. Just tap the color and you can see it starts to starburst out. I know yellow is not very bright. We already talked about that. So it's going to starburst out. Then I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to come back and I'm going to get some orange. I want to test it. Ooh, that looks good. There we go. Now you can probably see that better in the video of how it's starting to kind of bleed and burst, right? So I'm not trying to touch on top of the yellow. I'm trying to touch in between the spaces, and I'm still leaving some spaces white. So now I'm rinsing my brush one more time. And now I'm going to go back and steal some green. Double check. Yep, that looks good. And once you've done that, you're just going to let it dry. Just let it dry. Don't mess with it. Don't paint around. Don't move it around. The more you move it, the more all the colors will mush together and it won't look like anything at all besides one flat washed color. So leave it alone. Don't mess with it, but always use 3 colors that are side by side and start with the lightest color. Pause the video and try it on your own. We're down to the final couple of techniques. So we're going to do a 2-color wash next. In your 2-color wash, you should pick 2 colors that are side by side. So if you want to do orange and yellow, red and orange, yellow and green, green and blue, blue and violet, anything that they're side by side, but we don't want to do colors that are just all over the place. So pick 2 colors that are side by side. And we're going to do similar to what we did up in your graded wash. We're going to make a dark color and then water it down to make it light. And then to blend in the color, the second color at the bottom, we're going to start with a darker color and we're going to water it down to light. Let's see. What haven't I used yet? I haven't used red. So let's go red to orange. Again, brush always gets dipped in my water. Rub it a little bit here, test it up there. That's definitely not red enough. That looks like pink. We don't want pink, we want red. So I'm going to keep going. There we go. That's a good version of red. So I'm going to start dark to light. So just like we did with the graded wash. And I'm even going to steal some more of that color. 2 rows, dip my brush in my water, wipe it off. Rub across that edge, right? The overlapping edge. Dip my brush in, wipe off the excess. All right, and I'm going to come back up here at the top one more time just to bring it all down. There we go. So now, before this dries, and actually, I'm going to cheat just a little bit. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more red at the top. There we go. Now, I want to start with orange at the bottom. So again, before this dries, so I don't want to take too much time, I want to get some orange on my brush. That's too dark, so I'm going to add some more water to it. There we go. Still a little bit more water. There we go, that's better. We should always see the tray showing through. Now I'm going to start down here at the bottom, and I'm going to do about 2 or 3 rows of the orange and wipe my brush, dip and wipe. Keep going, dip and wipe, all the way up to the very top, and then you stop. So you don't want to push so far that it goes all the way over the edge. You want to stop part way, and then as this dries, you're going to get this really nice transition between red and orange, and it'll make a red orangish color in the middle. You are going to need a clean paper towel, which I just messed mine up, so I'm getting a clean paper towel. You're going to take your paper towel and you're going to roll it up into a little snowball. It doesn't need to be too tight, but it should hold its form, okay? So it should hold its form. It shouldn't come undone, and it shouldn't be a super, super tight pinch. You're going to hold it in the hand that doesn't have the brush, okay? So you're going to hold it in the hand that doesn't have the brush, and then in this wash with blotting, slide that over a bit more, we're going to make a wash, just like we've been doing. Little bit of color, test it up here. Ooh, that's not enough. Okay, let's get some more water. There we go. Okay. Go back and get some more water and some more color. And the reason why you're holding on to the paper towel is because right now you're going to take the paper towel crumbled up and you're going to press it and hold it before it dries. 1, 2, 3, and lift. Then I'm going to find a new edge. 1, 2, 3, and lift. Unfortunately, mine's starting to dry too fast, so I'm going to go back in and add a little more paint so that it shows up better. There we go. That's more like it. All right, paper towel again. Try to find a nice dry, clean side. 1, 2, 3, lift. 1, 2, 3, lift. 1, 2, 3, lift. What you're noticing is, I'm hoping you're seeing that there are these lighter sections that show up, and that lighter section is what we're hoping for. It creates kind of an interesting texture, and that'll create that lighter and darker effect. Then you're going to make sure that you have one of these little sponges, and you're going to look for the sharper side. So it's one of the short edges, and we want to use just the sharp side. We're not trying to use the flat side. We're literally going to be rubbing on the paper using that edge. So dip just the corner into your water, and I know your water's dirty, it's okay. Squeeze out most of that. We're using just that sharp edge, and what we want to do is rub back and forth, and you should start to see it's erasing the color, right? It's creating a stripe. So now there's too much color on there, so I'm going to rinse it out. And I'm going to come back again and see if I can erase out just a tiny bit more. But you can make designs with this. But as it gets full of paint, then you need to take it, just dip it in a little bit of water, squeeze out the excess again. But you're still just using that very, very fine edge. And it creates these nice designs for you. So use only that nice straight side, and then when you're done, just rinse it off and then kind of pinch it back into shape. There we go. All right, that was your watercolor techniques. To clean everything up today, what you're going to do is you're going to take your brush, rinse both of them out really well. Then you're going to take your brush and you're going to get your tray that's at the top here. You're going to get the tray wet, and you're going to loosen up and scrub up all those colors. And then you're going to take your paper towel that you used for the blotting, and you're just going to erase out all that color. If there's still color, then go back, get your brush wet, and do it again until the tray is nice and clean and ready for the next person to use. Then you're just going to leave it open with the two brushes and leave it sitting on the table. Don't close it, just let it air dry open tonight, okay? Good luck.